Hi everyone. So over the last few weeks, it's the whole question of making decisions has come up. I mean, how do we make decisions, and how do we choose which is the right decision to make and which is possibly the wrong decision to make? Everybody seems to have different positions around it. Some people think that one decision is better than another decision, and so we can argue about it. And in the end, it's like a little bit of a guesswork, isn't it? So, well, how is it that we go about making these decisions that we do make? And where does it arise from? Everybody says, I need to make a decision. Now, most decisions that we make tend to come around the thinking process. So we tend to talk about the risk versus benefits. In medicine, we certainly talk about risk versus benefits when we have serious decisions to make. So how then do we go about doing that? Well, we use our thinking mind. And the thinking mind can go into libraries and get all kinds of information. We can use our computers and AI and ChatGPT and all kinds of aids that we can use to try and collect together all the information we can in order to make a decision. Now, that's kind of what I call a linear thinking mind decision-making process. And AI is particularly good at that. It can collect much more information than I can hold in my mind. And from that information, it can kind of make risk versus benefit look a little bit easier. The trouble is that each time we get a better computer, gather more information, and put that information in, we can get often a different outcome. So the more information we put in doesn't mean it's going to be more accurate. Well, that's the question. That's questionable, and I want to talk about that. Does more information make it easier for us to make decisions? Putting together risk versus benefits. And as we know, it doesn't always work that way. Very often, the moment you add more information, it becomes more confusing. So does it make it easier? In hospitals and clinics, they talk about computers taking the history of people and then putting all that information in there, and then they're going to get out a better diagnosis, and the medical doctor could. Is that always so? It doesn't always work like that, because we're dealing with astonishing complexity. And because we're dealing with complexity, I've mentioned this before, how much information do we need? If we're going to get information that's just material matter information, that's one thing. But then what about energy information? What about information? There's just no end to the amount of stuff we can put in there. So in conventional medicine, we try and restrict the amount of information by only dealing with things which we can know, things which we can measure, things which are objective. And we tend to leave out all the subjective components because it becomes much too difficult. So you can see that even on the level of gathering information only, it doesn't necessarily help us to make a more informed choice. It seems to be that way, but it doesn't actually work that way in real life, because there's no end to the amount of information. Information doesn't even stay the same. It keeps changing, especially with living systems. So the one way we use to make so-called informed decisions is using the thinking mind. But there are other ways as well. And sometimes when, you've gathered all the information together and then somebody says to you, okay, what's your decision now? What are you going to do? Then often we start to talk about, my gut feeling is that I shouldn't do this. That's my gut feeling. Other people may use words like, I just know that I shouldn't be doing it. So we suddenly are face to face with other what can I call it, other structures we have that help us to make decisions. So the thinking mind is one, and the thinking mind is information. That's what it is. Gathers information and collects it all together in order to make a balance of choices. But then we also have gut feeling. And remember, gut feeling has a lot to do with our animal instincts, our fight-flight instincts. And that's very, very powerful and can override almost anything in our decision-making. And in fact, often we throw out the decision-making that comes from the thinking mind when fight-flight comes in. There's often danger attached to that, and we don't have time to put together all the facts. Then we just follow our gut feeling. We don't even think about it. We just follow the gut feeling. So gut feeling is another component, and that's obviously closer to our animal nature. And animals tend to use gut feeling, fight, flight. That's where it's coming from. So gut feeling is another operative tool. And men often like to use gut feeling. Women are often coming from what they call knowing. I just know. I don't know how I know it. You can give me all the information you want to, but I just need to follow my knowing, my deep knowing. And that gives me the way I operate and make decisions in the world. So we now have three components or three faculties that we use in making our decisions. One is the thinking mind, and many people are very insistent on using their thinking mind, gathering more information, and be very clever at arguments around why they're making choices. But it's in a way, it's theoretical. It's based on thinking mind, gathering all that information together. And then there is this other component of deep knowing. And deep knowing is where often intuition arises from. And from deep knowing, that deep knowing flows into the thinking mind, and then the thinking mind says, I've got a good idea. Where does it get the good idea from? That's obviously what we call intuition. So there's a deep knowing part that is below the surface of the thinking mind. You could call it the subconscious or the superconscious, whatever names you want to call it, but it's below the surface. It's not where the thinking mind operates. And then we have our gut feeling, which is much closer to our animal instincts level over there, and that can also drive us. And then, of course, we even have our sex center, which is a sex drive. That can make decisions on its own sometimes. So there are many different faculties that we have. Thinking, knowing, feeling, sex, if you want to include it into that domain. So these are all the operating tools that we actually have in order to make decisions. And a lot of people make decisions based on a mixture of all that, from thinking and knowing and feeling. And out of all that, they allow it to make a decision, which is the best way to make a decision. Each person is kind of unique and different. I mean, there's some people that are really, really invested in their thinking mind, and they're very rational, and they're very impersonal very often, and they deal only with the thinking mind. It's not right or wrong, it's just the way they're dealing with it. It's their, you could say, their highest faculties that they have developed, and they tend to be out of touch with their feeling self, and their gut feeling even is something that's the animal instinct, so they don't even go there. So whereas other people are very deep in the knowing part and very good at using the knowing part of things to help them to make decisions. The important thing is to recognize that we have all these different, they are faculties, and to be careful of not getting stuck in the thinking mind. Thinking mind is so powerful that it tends to override everything else, overrides our feeling and our knowing self. They are subjective components, and we're losing touch with those components. When we teach children, we tend to the teaching focus is on thinking. We don't teach children at school how to get in touch with their feeling self and knowing self. And that's a serious danger for me. So, and there's another question which I'm not going to deal with now, I'm going to deal with the next time. And that is the question, who makes the decision to use the thinking mind, to use knowing and to use feeling? We still say, I feel, I think, I know. Who is this I? And we need to reach into that space, because that's getting into touch with who you really are. But these are the components of thinking and how we make decisions, and we can talk about it more. Have a good day.